Well, we are continuing with chapter 3, and I have a feeling we'll probably be in chapter 3 next week too. I think we'll probably only get through 2 articles today, but we're just going to keep on going. So we are on Article 5 right now, and this is on election proper. So the first 4 have been talking about God's eternal decrees, and so here in in Article 5, the divines are going to spell out what exactly is election. And so I'll read it to you all. Those of mankind that are predestined unto life, God, before the foundation of the world was laid, according to his eternal and immutable purpose, and the secret counsel and good pleasure of his will, hath chosen in Christ unto everlasting glory, out of his mere free grace and love, without any foresight of faith or good works, or perseverance in either of them, or any other thing in the creature, as conditions or causes moving him thereunto, and all the praises of his glorious grace, and all to the praises of his glorious grace. So again here, this article summarizes the Westminster's Confession's understanding of election. Now, many of the points that were mentioned in here, we've talked about before, we've hinted at before, so again, this is more of like a summary. And so essentially one summary is that election is eternal. So that's what they start off with here. Election took place in eternity past. That was well before creation, well before the foundations of the world, well before any person was ever thought of or was ever a twinkling in their mother's eye. The electing love took place in eternity past. And of course, this is based in God's eternality and in God's unchanging wisdom and in God's all-knowing power and all omniscience and omnipotence. If God is all these things, again, there's a reason why we started with chapter 2, talking about the attributes of God. If God is all these things, then so too are his thoughts, so too are his actions. And so if God is eternal, if God is unchanging, if God is all-knowing, then that means he can't not know who is one of his children, because that would mean there's fault in God's wisdom. If there is no doctrine of election, then that means there's a doctrine of choice, a doctrine of free will, in the sense that anybody can choose to believe, or anybody can choose to not believe. And that means God doesn't know them until they say, oh yeah, I believe. And so suddenly God now sees them and says, oh yeah, you're mine. If we believe that God is sovereign and eternal and unchanging, then that means his knowledge, which also includes the knowledge of those who are his, is eternal, unchanging, and everlasting. So there's 2 ways of understanding how election is eternal. And this is really only a conversation that Calvinists have. And so if you don't believe in election, then you're not going to believe in these two ways of doing it. I'm just going to put it on here. One is called supralapsarian, and the other one is called infralapsarian. Yeah. So we sort of get a clue about what we're talking about here. We see this word lapse. We know what that means. To lapse is to fall. And so what we're talking about here is regarding the fall, the lapse. This is a Latin phrase. And so we have supralapsarian and infralapsarian. So essentially, supralapsarian means before the fall, and infralapsarian means after the fall. And so supralapsarianism, again, this is a way of understanding election. This was held by folks like Karl Barth and many others. God decreed both election and reprobation prior to creation. and then allowed the fall of man as a means of carrying out his divine purpose. So let me just sort of chart that on here. So again, this is election. The order would be election, then we have creation, and then we have the fall. God, again, because of his wisdom, his unchanging knowledge, God knew exactly what was going to happen when he made Adam and Eve. And so because he knew exactly what Adam and Eve were going to do, he had established the doctrine of election before the fall. That's what this particular camp says. And then infralapsarian, of course, after the fall. This is held by Dr. Sproul, who's the author of our book that I've been using, and many others. This school says that God foresaw and permitted the fall. So God knew the fall was going to happen. And so he elected, and then he created. That's, again, so God foresaw and permitted the fall, and that after the fall, he then decreed election as a means of saving some of the human race. So you can see, even within Calvinist camps, there are different ways of understanding election. Truthfully, the order doesn't really matter. Because again, this is one of those mysteries that we don't know. This isn't spelled out in Scripture. If it is, it's mentioned in both ways, which is why we have two ideas here. And so these are one of the mysteries of God that we will never really fully know. But what we do and what we must come to understand is that the order doesn't really matter so long as it is God who decrees. It is God who chooses and it is God who saves. We can't forget, and of course the Calvinists cannot forget, that it is God who is the actor. Regardless if it was before the fall or after the fall, God is the one who is acting in election. And so, yeah, so that's sort of the understanding of the doctrine of election and opening. You have a question?
So God has intentionally built conflict into his creation.
God allows conflict, yeah.
And these can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that he has intentionally.
Sure. And so supralapsarianism is actually a little bit more comfortable. It sort of answers your question. Dr. Sproul's, the infralapsarian has, God knew the fall was going to happen. God knew that people were going to rebel against him, and so he elects. And he elects the reprobate, or he elects the saved, and he reprobates the damned. In supralapsarianism, God, again, foreseeing the fall, knowing that things are going to happen, from eternity past, he actually does election. So it's long before. And so in a way, it's not so much it sounds a lot more negative than supralapsarian does. Again, now these are just arguments in between Calvinists. Again, if you don't believe in election, that's not going to make sense anyways. Because again, these are internal conversations. But again, the bottom line is that God elects.
When I was thinking about it, then the creation story, God made this on this day, and he saw that it was good, and this on this day, he saw that it was good. Okay, if you wanted everything to be good, why did he put a whole hunk of humanity there that's going to make it bad?
Sure. Well, and so I think it goes down to the notion that he created volitional beings, meaning we have a volition, we have a will. God didn't make puppets. If everybody has a will, but this is the doctrine of election. So God gave Adam and Eve a will, because again, they're not puppets. They have a will of their own. I mean, that's why he and we're going to talk about when we get to the chapter on creation. God gave them a command. he said, do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That means if God gave them a command, he also gave them the willpower to follow the command or not. But God, knowing what's going to happen, he still gave Adam and Eve that option. He could have said, I'm just going to make you perfect puppets and you're going to do everything good and righteous. But then we wouldn't be humans. Well, you have to before you get there, you have to start with creation. You have to understand that. And so with that volition that we have, that Adam and Eve had, they chose in that moment to disobey God. And so Adam and Eve, representing the federal head, especially Adam, is the federal head of the human race. And I use that word federal head, that's a theological term. We just got out of an election week. Joe Biden is the presumptive federal head of us. Right now in this lame duck period, Trump is our federal head. He represents us, you and me, on the global geopolitical stage. So that's what I mean by federal head. Adam is the human race's federal head. He represents everybody because of his relationship with God. And so because he sinned, every single one of his generations falls. And you just need to read Genesis chapter 4. Not even chapter 3, Cain and Abel. One son was righteous, the other son was not. And then you go there for one grandson. It goes down, it just keeps going. And so we see immediately how sin has entered the world. And so now, because of the fall, human will is still volitional. We still have a will, but it is bound to sin. We're not puppets. We're bound to sin. We have sin stained. That's a doctrine of total depravity. And so every single human being, because Adam was our federal head, and because he sinned, we have sin, and God is disappointed in that. God doesn't like that. And so we are all naturally inclined to not choose God. We're naturally inclined to be selfish. We're naturally inclined to be. So all the reprobate, to use the language here, they are all the ones whom God is passing over because they are in rebellion to him. The elect are all the ones who God is graciously pouring out his love onto. Because, again, God is eternal. God is all-knowing. There is no gaps in God's knowledge. And so if God knows everything, then he absolutely knows who are his children. And if God knows who his children are, he's elected them. So that's sort of the logical progression there. So that's why I had to start with creation, because you have to see how the series of events happen, which is why, again, where the fall falls in this scheme doesn't matter, so long as we know that it is God who elects. So that's sort of the main point of this first article, or the first section here. The second section, related to election being eternal, is, again, election is immutable. Just like God is immutable, just like God is eternal, election is immutable. So God is unchanging. That's what immutable means, unchanging. And if God is unchanging, then his decrees are unchanging. And of course, we find comfort in that because it is God who made a covenant with his people. It is God who made a promise with Abraham. And this is exactly what Paul draws on in Romans. It's the promise that God made with Abraham that is the foundation of his assurance. Is the foundation. It's not that God it's that God's unchanging nature is reflected in his unchanging promise, in his unchanging covenant. And so, likewise, creation, which was decreed, it therefore cannot be uncreated unless God says so. Creation is going to continue to exist unless and until God says otherwise. The covenant was decreed, and so it cannot be uncovenanted. God will not uncovenant with us because he is eternal. His promises are eternal. And so election being a decree, just like creation, just like the covenant, election is also eternal or unchanging. And so one cannot be unelected. And so there's this notion here that there is no plan B in God. Without the doctrine of election, it almost seems like there was a plan, God had a plan, and he set these things in motion, and then suddenly Adam and Eve messed it all up. And they made this mistake, and now God has to go back to the drawing board. All right, says, all right, well, I was going to do this, and now I can't do that, so now I got to do plan B, and it's going to involve my son, and it's going to involve the cross and things like that. God didn't go back to the drawing board at the fall because God is unchanging. His wisdom and understanding, his counsel and his will, these are unchanging. They're rooted in his attributes. He's infallible, he's omniscient, he's perfect, and he is righteous. And so God's will, which is what we're talking about here in election, his will is unchanging. It's immutable. Now, in this conversation, Dr. Sproul presents an astute question. He asks, if someone is not numbered among the elect, so if someone's a reprobate, if someone is not numbered among the elect, all the intercessory prayers, all the evangelism, all the work on his behalf, it will not cause him to be added to the elect. And so the question is, why should we bother at all to pray for someone's salvation? If election is unchanging, why do we even need to be praying? Well, here's the bottom line. Election, the details of election, that is unknown to us. We are not in the mind of God. We cannot read or peer into God's mind to see who is elected and who is reprobate. We don't have that access. One, just thinking logically, we are finite beings. You and I are going to die at some point, right? We are going to cease to exist. At least our bodies are. God is not going to cease existing. He is eternal and unchanging. And so we, in this current mortal state, we don't even have the capacity to take in the fullness of the doctrine of election. And that's just one bit of the doctrine of God. I mean, just think about all the other mysteries of God that we just don't have. I mean, just think of using computer terms. We don't have the RAM to sustain the fullness or even the operating system that God is working with. We don't have that capacity. And so we cannot know who is elect and who is reprobate. Now, you yourself, I individually, you can have an assurance, but that assurance usually comes after a conversion. But we cannot see that as a certainty in others. We certainly should hope that way. We should hope that people are elect. And we should continue to proclaim and to preach and teach and pray with that hope that every person we're encountering is an elect. But the bottom line is we just don't know. And so this is what Dr. Sproul says our prayers should look like. Not knowing a person's decree or his final destiny, we should ask God to reveal to so-and-so, to reveal to such and such person his election, and bring it to fulfillment and realization in his life. We don't know it. God knows it. And so we should pray. We should pray that God reveals, that homeless guy's election. We should pray that God shows his electing love in whomever we encounter. And so we continue to pray. We continue to evangelize. That's the whole point of evangelism, is to go and proclaim the gospel so that the elect can hear and respond. And so election is in eternity. So election is eternity past. Conversion is in history. So the election leads to conversion, produces conversion in a person, and that conversion happens in space and time. It happens in their life. And that's part of the electing call, is that there is a conversion. And the conversion of a person is the key to understanding that, is the key and the reason why we preach, why we pray, and why we witness. Because what we can know is if a person is converted. Because they'll tell us if they have a conversion experience, if they have a relationship with Jesus Christ, if they've come to know the Lord, their God, as their Savior. That's a conversion experience. And we need to preach that. We need to proclaim that. We need to make sure every believer who is in the church has had a conversion experience. Because that is something that we can know. And then the third aspect of election is that it's private, in the sense that God knows who his elect are. It's in the secret counsel of God. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29 says, "The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and to our sons forever." So there are things that God keeps secret to himself, things that we cannot know, that he doesn't want us to know. And there's going to be secrets when we are in glory, in heaven, because even in our glorified state, we won't be able to fully comprehend God. And so the things that God, as Deuteronomy says, as Moses says in 29, the things that God has deemed to keep secret will be kept secret. They belong to God and to him alone. But the things that he reveals, i.e. this, look at this. This is a long book. This is all God's revelation. This is what God has revealed to us. This is ours. This is for our children and for our grandchildren and for the generations and for the world. This is for us to know and to understand. God would never have given us a book that we could never come to know. And so it is our concern to understand, to master the things that God has pleased to reveal to us. We should study God's word. We need to wrestle with the hard doctrines. We need to come to an understanding of what God has pleased to reveal to us. Revealed to us. It is also necessary to not worry then about what God has not pleased to reveal to us. We can't go to God and demand that he tell us his secret things. That's not our place. We are the creature. I think I mentioned this before. I don't remember. I've been talking to so many groups, I always forget who I'm talking to. The reason why the Old Testament forbids things like sorcery and necromancy and witchcraft and things like that, that's because those things are trying to peer into the mind of God. Now just think about Saul, who went to the witch of Endor. Why did he go to her? Because he wanted to talk to Samuel in the afterlife. That's not something we should be doing, because those things try to peer into God's mind and to look behind the curtain of his secret counsel. And God has deemed that we cannot know the things that he keeps secret. And so in this case, God is pleased to reveal to us the doctrine of election. That word election appears numerous times in the Bible. So the doctrine of election is real. It is a doctrine that we can understand. But he is also not pleased to reveal to us the full scope of that doctrine. There are things in that very doctrine that we cannot fully understand. And so those things that are private to God remain in God. And so another astute question that Dr. Sproul asks in light of this, he says, how can I know the will of God for my life? That's a question that many of us have. If we're talking about specifically the doctrine of election and how that's private. Well, doesn't God want us to do something? Doesn't God have a will for my life? How am I supposed to know that? Well, the question actually depends on if you're asking for God's revealed will or his hidden will. If you're asking for God's revealed will, then simply pour yourself into his word. There you will find God's will for your life. There you will find God's call for sanctification and for good works in your life. Just throw out a couple in there. Read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, Ephesians chapter 2, and Titus chapter 2. Great passages on what it is God wants us to do. Now, if you want for God's hidden will to be revealed, then the answer is simply you cannot know it. If God has chosen to keep something hidden, that is in his counsel. And quite frankly, then, it is none of our business. Calvin even comments on things like this. He says, where God closes his holy mouth, I will desist from inquiry. That, I think, has caused or the opposite of that, has caused so much dissension in the church. When we try to peer into the secret mind and secret counsel of God, we begin to speculate about God. And what does that lead to? That leads to disunity. It leads to false doctrines. So any speculation into or about God's secret counsel is in fact irreligious. It's impious, and it's forbidden. Every Christian must turn to God's revealed will if we want to know his call and his desire in our life. And of course, that revealed will is his word. There we find the manifold principles that God has ordained for our ethical and our moral judgments. For instance, God, does he want you to become a minister? Well, just look to the scriptures. You don't need to pray, or you can pray, but you can look to the scriptures for the answer. You don't have to try and probe the mind of God for hours. Simply turn to the qualifications that are set forth in Scripture. And so if you lack these qualities, then there's no need for a special message from heaven. God's will on that matter has been revealed. And there are many such examples in the Scriptures. I just used that one. And lastly, I think this is lastly. Nope, second to last, penultimately. Election is in Christ. Here's the thing. We always seem to think about election as about us, because that's an example of our sin, isn't it? We're prideful. It's all about me, right? How does this affect me? We think that election is about me, about us. But really, the doctrine of election is about Jesus. John chapter 6, verses 38 through 49. Here, Jesus himself says, "For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." So first of all, Jesus is here for a purpose. To do something that God has foreordained and to bring it about. What is that will? Well, Jesus answers for us in verse 39. "And this is the will of him who sent me, that of everything that he has given me, I will lose nothing, but will raise it up on the last day." In his sovereign wisdom, God the Father chooses, ordains, commands God the Son for glory. And so Dr. Sproul says, to glorify the Son, the Father gives him gifts. He gives him things of glory to glorify him. And these gifts are people who belong to the world, people who are broken, sinful people, rebellious. God takes them out of the world and gives them to his Son. That's election. The elect is not for us. It's for Jesus. It's to fulfill Jesus' promise. If Jesus says he has come for those who his Father has given him, then those who his Father has given him are going to him. And their call is for his glory. In fact, Jesus even prays for those whom the Father gives to him. John 17, the high priestly prayer, verses 6 through 9. I have revealed your name to the men whom you gave me out of the world. They were yours, and you gave them to me. And they have followed your word. Now they have come to know that everything which you have given me is from you. For the words which you gave me, I have given to them. And they received them, and truly understood that I came forth from you. And they believed that you sent me. And so I ask on their behalf, says Jesus. Do not ask on behalf of the world, but on the behalf of those whom you have given to me, because they are yours. The whole thrust of the high priestly prayer of Jesus is to pray for those whom God has given to him. And who has God given to them? It is the elect. Jesus also has another prayer for the Apostle Peter, and we talked about this before. In Luke 22, verses 31 through 34, remember what he said? He said, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demand to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you, both to prison and to death. And Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. The devil wanted Peter to lose his faith in Christ. And so Jesus prayed for him. He prayed on his behalf that his faith might not fail. And so Jesus' intercession in Peter's life returned Peter from his sin of rejecting Jesus. So here's the thing about election. The elect are not perfect people. Too often, and this is actually probably the fault of Presbyterianism, too often when we talk about the elect, people think of holier-than-thou attitudes. Oh, I'm one of the elect. I don't need to worry about it. I'll saunter around, do whatever. I'm never gonna lose it. That's true. The elect can never lose their salvation. But the elect can and do fall. They can and do sin. It's not a final falling away, but it's a stumble. Peter's the perfect example. Peter did deny Jesus. 3 times he denied. He sinned. He recanted his faith in Jesus. How many, and including Peter later, how many martyrs died instead of recanting Jesus? Peter, at the time of Calvary, at the cross, at Jesus' passion, he denied his Savior 3 times. Peter sinned. Don't think that was nothing. That was a big something. And so the elect do sin. We are not perfect people. The elect are not perfect saints. The elect fall. But election is not about us. When we think about the holier-than-thou elect, they're thinking about themselves. They're thinking about me. It's not about us. Election is about Christ. And so Jesus likewise intercedes now in the life of every one of his elect. Jesus is always praying for his elect, those who are gifted to him. He is right now on the right hand of God and interceding on their behalf. When we sin, he says, Father, forgive them. He says, Father, I will be with them. He says, Holy Spirit, bring them back to me. That is election. It always points to Christ. It's not ever anything that you and I do. And so lastly, election then is a gift. In 1524, Desiderius Erasmus, he got into a huge debate with Martin Luther on this very topic. So it's been going around for hundreds of years. Erasmus claimed that the Reformation axiom, and we've talked about this, sola fide, faith alone. He said that that was evidence enough of man's free will. So Luther responded. So again, this is before social media, before all the TVs and those types of things. Back in those days, the way they debated is they wrote treaties, tracts, papers, essays, books back and forth to each other. So Luther received Erasmus's diatribe, and now he responds back with a treatise of his own, which becomes known as on the bondage of the will. And so we've talked a little bit about how the will is bound, and earlier when we talked about the fall. What Erasmus was doing is he was highlighting sola fide. He said, that's all you need. That right there is enough to tell you that people have a free will. All they need to do is believe. They just need to have faith in Jesus Christ. If you don't have faith in Jesus Christ, then you're not saved. That's a true statement. But what Erasmus had wrong was that sola fide is just the tip of the iceberg. In sola fide, you also have sola gratia. We have sola scriptura. We have solus Christus. And ultimately, soli Deo Gloria. What Erasmus failed to do, and what he did, was he pulled sola fide, ripped it apart from the other four axioms. These 5 points, these 5 arguments are the basis of the Reformation. And so by pulling out sola fide and ignoring the rest, Erasmus was essentially undoing and unhinging the work of the Reformation. And so sola fide is supported and is underlined by grace alone. And so faith alone, the means by which we are saved, how we are saved, we're saved by faith. Erasmus and Luther would agree that faith is necessary for salvation. But faith is built upon, it rests on grace alone. Grace is not something we earn, right? I can't demand God to give me a gift, right? I can't wait for Christmas next year, probably when Teddy starts saying, "Give me this, Daddy, give me that. I want this for Christmas." We can't do that to God. We certainly should pray, but we can't demand it. God, give me salvation. Give me your grace. Grace is a free gift. And without grace, there is no faith. A person cannot confess faith in Christ if God has not given them the ability to do so. These are not cooperative ventures, so to speak. Faith plus works does not equal justification. That was the math of the Roman Catholic Church. We have faith plus works equals justification. That was the Roman Catholic schema. If you partnered with God, if you did the things that your priest said, if you did the X number of rosaries, if you did such and such things, if you participated in all the sacraments, then you were participating and bolstering your justification. Rather, what the Reformers said is that faith is equal to justification plus works. Faith is the gift. Faith is the result of God. Faith is the result of election. And so when the elect have faith, when they recognize, when they have that conversion moment, then they see that they are justified and that in their justification, they practice sanctification, which is works of righteousness. Works of righteousness never come along with faith. Works of righteousness are a result of faith, and so is justification. All right, so that's Article 5. Any questions? If not, Article 6 is actually a short one, so we might press on real quick. Okay, let me read Article 6. As God hath appointed the elect unto glory, so hath he, by the eternal and most free purpose of his will, foreordained all the means thereunto. Wherefore, they who are elected, being fallen in Adam, are redeemed by Christ, are effectually called unto faith in Christ by his Spirit working in due season, are justified, adopted, sanctified, and kept by his power through faith unto salvation. Neither are any other redeemed by Christ, effectually called, justified, adopted, sanctified, and saved, but the elect only. Now, each of those, essentially this is the Ordo Salutis, and we're going to talk about that briefly, but we're not going to dive into the details of each of these things because the confession does that for us. A little later, we're actually going to, each one of these is a chapter in the confession, and so we're going to unpack each of those there. For now, we just need to think about the effectiveness of election, of God's decrees. So Romans chapter 8, verses 29 through 30. Here we have the Ordo Salutis. Paul says, for those whom he foreknew, those whom God knew were his, foreknew in an intimate way, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son. So those whom he foreknew will be like Christ, will be conformed to his image, so that he would be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. Talking about the gifts that God has given to Jesus there. It's another way of saying is that not only are the elect gifts given to God, the elect are brothers and sisters with Christ, sharing in his inheritance. Verse 30, and those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Now, the problem when it comes to understanding the Ordo Salutis is that very often, and this is where many denominations have erred, is that we're quick to think that the Ordo Salutis, that the order of salvation is temporal, in the sense that it has to flow in a certain time and space manner. That's not necessarily true. The Order Salutis, the order of salvation, is less temporal and more logical. There is a logic to the Ordo Salutis. It's logical rather than temporal because, think for instance, what's the relationship between faith and justification? Paul doesn't actually include faith in this list, but we know that faith is part of salvation. And so where does faith fall in the Ordo Salutis? Things like regeneration, redemption, sanctification, all those were also left out in Paul's letter to the Romans. Where do they fall? They're part of it. And so the plan of salvation then has a logical order. And so the Westminster Confession follows that order. foreknown, redeemed. So God whom he has foreknown, those who he has known from eternity past who are his children, he has redeemed. And he will regenerate them. He will call them forth in time and space. He will justify them. He will adopt them, sanctify them, and glorify them. That's the order of salvation. Dr. Sproul says the plan is conceived eternally. The plan has always been set in place. Remember, there's no plan B. That's the plan, plan A, plan only. The plan was set in place, but it is realized temporally. And that makes sense, because not every single human being exists at the same point in time, right? You and I exist in this era. We didn't exist 1,000 years ago. And so there is the order salutis is revealed in time and space, because in time and space there is a progression. And so although someone could be elect at the moment of his birth, which he most often is, he is not justified at that time. Because justification is a time and space thing. So the timing will be different for every person. Just think about those who have their deathbed confessions. If they are part of the elect, they didn't come to that conversion point until they are on their deathbed. They lived their life in such a manner, but it reveals in that final moment that that was the timing God had ordained. And so some will respond on a deathbed, and many others will respond. They'll have a lifetime to respond. To bring about this plan, God not only appoints the final result, which is what this particular article is talking about. The end result, salvation, is not only appointed, because it is, but he also appoints the means by which the result is achieved. The various things that will happen in a person's life. He gives us the means of grace. Word, sacraments, and prayer. And there are others, but those are the three big ones. God uses the foolishness of preaching as a means of grace. God's word has the power of salvation. And so God's word proclaimed is through sermons, through teachings. And so the Puritans, they believed that preaching of God's word was the highest, the greatest, and the chief means through which God brought about his plan of salvation. And so God has an eternal plan, and we exist in time and space. And so we, who are existing in time and space, participate in the means through which God ordained that plan. God uses the Lord's Supper as a means of grace. The sacrament nourishes us in body and in spirit. The sacrament reminds us of Christ's suffering, of Christ's death, of what Christ purchased, meaning us, our redemption. And God uses prayer as a means of grace. Corporate and individual worship, these refine and refocus our faith. Remember, we all have sin still in us. No one is perfect. No elect is perfect. All the elect still have the stain of sin on them. The elect are only forgiven of the penalty of sin, meaning they don't get hell. But we still have to battle with the stain of sin in our lives. And so we have things like worship, things like fellowship, where we can work out our faith in fear and trembling, in the sense that we can continue to mortify sin in our lives. You see, corporate and individual prayer is not about being religious. Too often, that's what people on the outside of the church say. Oh, they're super religious. They're praying all the time. They're doing all these things all the time. Rather, prayer is not about being religious. It's about being diligent. And not just diligent, but diligent in pursuing the means that God has ordained. And so we, as Christians, as believers, hopefully as the elect, we recognize that there are these means in the world, that God uses people to bring about the call in others' lives. And so we need to be praying. We need to be pursuing. We need to be actively out there ministering, evangelizing, whatever language you want to use. We need to be proclaiming the gospel. Because when people hear, when the elect hear, they will respond. That's God's promise. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. We got 5 minutes, so I think I'll answer any questions, if anyone has any. Yes, Jean.
Okay, I want to back up a little bit.
I know, you joined us about...
Well, not just that. Babies,
Mm-hmm.
are they saved?
That's a very good question.
Say they die shortly after they are born.
You know, that's one of those mysteries of God. He doesn't say either way in Scripture. So there's ways that we can approach that. And the reason why I've looked into that recently, there are those who say, and I'm saying there's those because I don't know yet where I fall. I'm still wrestling with it. There are those who say that that God saves all infants who don't reach what is known as the age of accountability. So if you believe in the age of accountability, that's a point in a person's life, in a child's life, where beyond that point, she is now responsible for her or his sin. Before that point, God isn't beholding that sin against them, because an infant doesn't have the mental capacity, or even a fetus doesn't have the mental capacity to comprehend the moral implications of sin. That's the age of accountability, when a child is able to comprehend that. So one school says God saves all people who die when they don't reach the age of moral accountability. So it's not just infants, but the mentally disabled, those who, I don't know what the right wording is nowadays, but those who just don't have the mental capacity, God saves them too. Now that's one school. The other school says God elects whomever he elects. And so God, from eternity past, knows who his children are. And so that means there are some babies who are elect and some who are reprobate. And just like you and I are either elect or reprobate, God has called a child. So regardless of if they reach age accountability or not, they're either elect or they're reprobate. And that's in God's mind. Remember, there's things we can't probe God's mind. Just like I can't demand that God tell me if you're elect, I can't demand God to say, elect that baby. So those are the two schools. I'm not really sure where I fall yet, because I don't believe in the age of accountability. That's a Baptist doctrine. Reformed Christianity, if we believe in election, it's hard to believe in the age of accountability. But at the same time, I wrestle with, all right, there are unelect, there's reprobate babies out there. And so I don't know. I'm still wrestling. But that's how I would answer that question with those two answers. And I can't give you the right one, but those are the two that I've heard of, that I've studied.
Well, and at the same time, I think about my sister.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a little bit different. You know, I think, you know, that's a hard thing, because things like dementia, that comes on later in life. And so does a person who lives a life before dementia, they have the opportunity. Again, it goes back to the notion of age of accountability. If you believe in the age of accountability, then that person has had that moment, and hopefully they believe. And if not, then they're beyond that. And so then that comes to the question of, well, where does the, and so I don't know. Then that's, that's that's just one of the hard mysteries that I don't have an answer for, because it's not written out in Scripture clearly. We have to infer on that. When it comes to things like that, I think I find comfort in the doctrine of election, knowing that a person doesn't have to have the mental capacity to choose, because God is the one who chooses. It is God who extends that grace. But at the same time, I can see how that's not comforting. So again, I don't know, and I'm sorry I can't give you a solid answer, but no, that's a very good question to wrestle with. But like I said, that's one of the things I feel pretty confident that we won't know about. And we can't press God too much on that, because then we fall into blasphemy.
Well, I kind of fudged on my sister. I started when she first
Mm-hmm.
went off the grid. She was always working in the church.
Mm-hmm.
She was, in my mind,
Mm-hmm.
she was a strong Christian.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And in that case, I think that, like I said, the age accountability part makes sense. There's comfort. That's not going to change. Just because her mental state changed in later life, that's not affecting salvation. That's a result of our fallen world. The reason why things like dementia and cancer exist is because we live in a broken and sinful world. We don't live in a perfect world. And so that is a result of just being alive in the world. And so that, again, it's not a reflection of salvation or election. It's just a result of sinfulness. So, but again, I can't. Yeah. It's hard. It is hard. But that's a very good question. Any other questions?
a new category. We have those who don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
We have these babies, who some don't have a choice and some do.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them are being aborted. What
Mhm.
about the ones that were that got aborted?
Mm-hmm.
What goes on there?
Well, again, it's still,
They had no
yeah.
choice.
And again, it's still, abortion is that's a different question. Because that goes to the question of, well,
I'm not bringing up the question, is that right or wrong?
no, but I think, but
What
the,
about those babies who didn't get the choice?
and it goes back to God's sovereignty. Again, we have to recognize that God is in control of everything. God is sovereign over everything. For God's, out of his mysterious wisdom, he ordains that some be aborted. Now, does that mean the mother is not culpable? Of course she is. If she does it, that I personally believe abortion is murder. And she will have to pay for that, or she will have to be forgiven for that. But God still, in his sovereignty, it's not that he didn't know someone was going to die. God knows everything. And so again, that's part of the mysteries that we can't press. We shouldn't be pressing. Now, again, it goes back, and regardless of whether a baby is aborted or a baby is stillborn or whatever, God's election is his own prerogative. It's his own choice. And so, if a person is elect, it doesn't matter when or how they die, they're going to heaven. Because that's part of God's electing love. So that's how I sort of answer it. But again, that's just that brings in a whole web of other things that go in there. But there are still only two categories: elect, reprobate, in this schema. I don't like that word, reprobate. I don't even like reprobate. It's just an old word that the theologians have been using, so I have to use it. Any other questions? All right. I think we're just a little over time, so I'll close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I want to thank you so much again for this opportunity to gather around and fellowship and to study your word and to wrestle with your revealed will. Lord, there's so many mysteries that, one, we will never know, and two, are just hard for us to wrap our heads around. And so, God, I in all these things, as we struggle, as we wrestle, as we try to understand, God, I just ask that you give us, each and every one of us, a spirit of humility. Too often we easily slip into pride, into sense that we deserve something. But God, we don't. And so, God, we just ask that your Holy Spirit, humble us. Remind us that you are sovereign, and that you're in control. And that if we truly understand that and believe that, we can hope. We can have hope. And we can pray. We pray all this in Jesus' name.